It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the sequel, double Feedback Friday, double feature. This week, I'm giddy because I really don't want to do this. Really, really, really don't want to do this. But I feel like I have to. So if you agree, if you think this kind of dialogue is important, help support this channel, become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/Leanna K. Because, now, okay. Even though the angries came out in the first video, when the people who were not trolling the internet to cause drama on anything related to J.K. Rowling, after we got past that, the feedback was very positive for the subsequent videos. And better viewed than I expected them to be. I expected the traffic on those to be fairly low. Even though the original video got kind of hate bombed, it still remained in 3/4 positive territory. So yay. There is still some risk in defending the rights of dignity and trans people. I'm going to do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. Okay. And this is what makes this difficult, because I also believe very strongly that people should disagree with someone's point of view vociferously if you must, if you feel strongly about it. But I don't believe in cancel culture. Now, everybody deserves to vote their conscience, especially with their dollars. Whenever you come out and say something contentious, you do take a risk that you're going to put someone off. I accept this. My problem is I have tried to be middle of the road to keep everybody happy. It's not me. I'm just, I just get too annoyed by bullshit. And I have to call bullshit on what J.K. Rowling posted on Wednesday after the last video I did on this. She's entitled to her views, okay? I don't like the positioning as victim to try to claim that she should be somehow beyond question, or this somehow validates just inaccurate and false, in some cases misleading comments because she was harmed in the past. I am just, no. When people are like, I'm being harassed, you guys know I don't go with that. And so there's like 6 paragraphs of the things she put out that can just be thrown out for that reason. But there are other things that she said that were flat out misleading. And I don't know how much I'm gonna be able to get into here without this being super, super long, but I do have a few things prepared. So here's the thing, and she just put out another free 7 to 9-year-olds book on this website called the Ichabog. And then she said, warning, this piece contains inappropriate language for children. This is not necessarily the smartest time to be wading into this stuff if you're putting out kid-friendly content. Just saying. But yeah, She starts with the Maya Fort Stator stuff. And she says, a tax specialist who'd lost her job for what were deemed transphobic tweets. She took her case to an employment tribunal, asking the judge to rule on whether a philosophical belief that sex is determined by biology is protected in law. Judge Taylor ruled that it wasn't. This is misleading. She said this before. People keep buying into this stuff. This was not what Maya Forstater lost her job for. This is not what the judge ruled on. What the judge ruled on was the fact that Miss Forstater believes trans women holding certificates that recognize their gender identity cannot describe themselves as women. It was not that she put up some tweets. It was that she was going to deny a government decree that you recognize a person by a term that affirms their gender identity. Okay, there's the J.K. Rowling tweet, but look at the paragraph above. Miss Forstater had argued framing the question of transgender inclusion as an argument that male people should be allowed into women's spaces discounts women's right to privacy and is fundamentally illiberal. It is like forcing Jewish people to eat pork. So it was not, she was not fired for believing, as J.K. Rowling said, that sex is determined by biology. She is entitled to her own views. But she can't deliberately misgender people and continue to work in anything close to the public sector. It's a human rights abuse. You know, it's the same thing. If you want to work for a private business and refuse to bake a wedding cake for a gay couple, that's your right. But if you work in any academic institution or government service in any way, and she was a tax expert at a think tank, okay, so nonprofit, probably gets some sort of government status, like government kickbacks, preferential tax stuff. You can't do that. You can't. It is a human rights abuse. That's not my opinion. That's the law. And the whole question is, did she violate the law? Now, you can claim it's an unfair law, but you can't claim it's not violation of the law. So if you knowingly violate a law because you think it's unfair, you have to be prepared to accept the predictable consequences for that action. Not the same thing. Misleading statement number 1. J.K. Rowling then goes on to talk about all the time she's been canceled. Strangely, once you get canceled, you have no career. That's not what happened to her. You can't be canceled 4 or 5 times, as she claims. But then she goes on to talk about Magdalene Burns. And she describes Magdalene Burns as an immensely brave young feminist and lesbian who is dying of an aggressive brain tumor. Why it matters that she's a lesbian, I don't know. Other than it's a move by a lot of people in trans exclusionary circles to hold up lesbians as a sort of shield of, look, I'm not phobic against LGBTQ plus people. This is a lesbian. It's not the same thing, okay? But a brave young feminist and lesbian who is dying of an aggressive brain tumor. Dying of a brain tumor doesn't make you right. It also doesn't make you a good person. I followed her because I wanted to contact her directly, which I succeeded in doing. However, as Magdalene was a great believer in the importance of biological sex and didn't believe lesbians should be called bigots for not dating trans women with penises, dots were joined in the heads of Twitter trans activists and the level of social media abuse increased. Well, okay. This sounds like, oh, this woman has been so harmed against. I'm going to show you a tweet that, as far as I know, is not faked. Okay? Trigger warning on this. On race, transphobia, and a bunch of other things. So if you are exhausted by this stuff, just look away, move forward 20 seconds and pick back up. Because here we go. This is this brave, young, dying lesbian feminist, okay? I'm not even going to read it. Okay. I have to for people who are visually impaired. Here we go. I'm going to bleep, okay? You are effing blackface actors. You aren't women. You're men who get sexual kicks from being treated like women. F you and your dirty effing perversions. Our oppression isn't a fetish, you pathetic, sick F. This is the brave, dying feminist lesbian. Paints a different picture, doesn't it? Right? Perhaps people's issue with Magdalene Burns, who has since passed away, I understand, is not that she was a great believer in the importance of biological sex. Maybe it's because she tended to tweet inflammatory stuff like that. You can believe in biological sex and the importance of it and not be an asshole like that. Just say, do you see how the picture is misleading? And then she goes on about all the abuse she suffered for one. Oh, okay. She starts about how abused she was, pro-victim. We've seen this before, right? Doesn't make you right. Doesn't make you right. Just because people said mean things to you does not make you right. I've had plenty of people say plenty of mean things to me. It doesn't make me right. It doesn't make them right. They just didn't argue their case well, okay? But then she talks about the Avalanche. Listen to, oh my God, it's purple prose. Okay, she's never been the greatest writer, but this is Harlequin romance novel, even by her standards. What I didn't expect in the aftermath of my cancellation was the avalanche of emails and letters that came showering down upon me. It's a shower of an avalanche, okay, people? The overwhelming majority of which were positive, grateful, and supportive. Okay, so people who have your emails, who know you, who are probably more inclined to think the way you do, but also you are very rich and powerful, J.K. Rowling. Perhaps they're kissing your ass, okay? But this came from a cross-section of kind, empathetic, and intelligent people, some of them working in fields dealing with gender dysphoria and trans people, who are all deeply concerned about the way a socio-political concept is influencing politics, medical practice, and safeguarding. They're worried about the dangers to young people, gay people, and about the erosion of women and girls' rights. Above all, they're worried about a climate of fear that serves nobody, least of all trans youth, well. Avalanche of letters that came showering down upon me. Mixed metaphor. Aren't I wonderful? We are the champions, my friend. This is the habit in her writing that I cannot stand. And when it's a halfway cheesy book about wizards going, Expelliarmus and stuff, it's fine. But on an issue like this, the reason Christopher Hitchens got known for his slaps is they were short. That I admit, that purple prose just really offends me. I cannot take her seriously on issues like this when her writing gets that emotional and flowery. And then, of course, she stepped back from Twitter for many months, both before and after tweeting support for Maya. Okay, why'd you step away before? That had nothing to do with that. It's irrelevant. It was doing nothing good for my mental health. I only returned because I wanted to share a free children's book during the pandemic. Okay, then share the free effing children's book. Don't go off about trans people. If that's all you wanted to do that. BS. That's all you wanted to do, because that's not what you did. Oh no, but she blamed others. Immediately, activists who clearly believe themselves to be good, kind, and progressive people swarm back into my timeline, assuming a right to police my speech, accuse me of hatred, call me misogynistic slurs, and above all, as every woman involved in this debate will know, turf. Okay, do you notice how she says the people that agree with her are objectively good people? Kind, empathetic, and intelligent people. You notice how they are objectively good people, but the people who disagree with her only think they are good people? This is manipulative writing. Okay? And turf. Okay? Turf. Oh, the dreaded turf. I admit I know that people who are gender critical don't like the term TERF. They consider it a slur. But TERF is just a short form for what they are: trans exclusionary radical feminists. They are radical feminists who believe in biological essentialism, meaning biology determines what you are. It is the essence of who you are in terms of gender identity. And so trans people aren't women. TERF is not a slur. TERF is just a short form describing what they think. And J.K. Rowling can complain about the term all she wants. She fits the description. And it's wrong to insist that first of all, she claims that TERF is an acronym coined by, it says here, coined by trans activists. It actually wasn't, from what I understand. It was actually coined by radical feminists who believed that rape survivors had the right to be in penis-free spaces. That's my understanding of where it came from. So the understanding of the origin of the term differs between me and her. And she's done intensive reading on the subject, so I'll give her that one, but that's not my understanding. In practice, a huge and diverse cross-section of women who are currently being called TERFs, and the vast majority have never been radical feminists. So the issue at play here is not the trans exclusionary element of the label, but the radical feminist element of the label. Lady, you broke the internet complaining about an article on menstruation. That is a radical act. Embrace it. Okay? Just wear the label. It will look better. Okay? Like, and then she beats the emotional examples of so-called TERFs range from the mother of a gay child who was afraid their child wanted to transition to escape homophobic bullying. You notice what's being left out there? Whether your kid indicated any desire to transition? Just saying. To a hitherto totally unfeminist older lady who's vowed never to visit Marks and Spencer again because they're allowing any man who says they identify as a woman into the women's changing rooms. Do you notice the language there? They're allowing any man who says they identify as a woman into the women's changing rooms. She's identifying trans people as men, trans women as men, or gender non-conforming people as men. She's saying trans women are men. Because if somebody identifies as a woman, but they don't look femmy enough to pass, what, that poor employee is going to say, no, you can't come in here? And, okay, changing rooms aren't communal. Okay? They're individual stalls. So seriously, who the hell cares? There's nobody else in there with them, right? Like, this doesn't make any sense. No one is seeing anybody else's nudity. The only reason you come out into the common area of changing rooms is to get to the larger mirror. You're clothed. Everyone is clothed. There's an attendant right there. What do you think is going to happen? This is insane. It's certainly, radical. And I don't believe it when most people go, I'm never shopping there again. Ironically, radical feminists aren't even trans exclusionary. Ironically, radical feminists aren't even trans exclusionary. They include trans men in their feminism because they were born women. What? Okay. You can be a radical feminist and not be trans exclusionary radical feminist. That's essentially where I fit, right? Like, a lot of you guys think I'm pretty kooky when it comes to this stuff, okay? I am not moderate on these issues. I have been open about it. So call me radical. but I'm trans inclusive. So, yes, radical feminists aren't trans exclusionary, but a trans inclusive radical feminist does not believe trans men are women. And we don't believe they were born women. Trans men are men. They were born men. Their brains just didn't match their bodies. That's all. They're men. Trans men are not women. What the F you on, J.K. Rowling? Like, this is just so manipulative and bad. And the only way you can see any sort of logic in this is if you are predisposed to believing this nonsense. So I'll skip past, intimidation, so according, like, she throws up straw men, like, according to the kind of people who argue that clownfish prove humans aren't a dimorphic species, like, like, why am I doing this? Why do I speak up? And then she says, well, I've got 5 reasons for being worried about the new trans activism and deciding I need to speak up. I'm sorry, is this new? Or is this stuff that you've been looking into for 2 years before you backed Maya Forstater? Because Maya Forstater was a year ago. So is it new? Or have you been thinking this for a while? But five reasons. So, 5, here we go. This is gonna be good. Okay? I'm sorry. Just the manipulation is driving me nuts. First, I have a charitable trust that focuses... virtue signaling. I have a charitable trust that focuses on alleviating social deprivation in Scotland, with a particular emphasis on women and children. Among other things, my trust supports projects for female prisoners and for survivors of domestic and sexual abuse. Okay. I also fund medical research into MS, a disease that behaves very differently in men and women. It's been clear to me for a while that the new trans activism is having, or is likely to have, if all demands are met, a significant impact on many of the causes I support, because it's pushing to erode the legal definition of sex and replace it with gender. Okay. Leanna time. I have a close family member with MS. No, it's not! Granted, we're in a different country, but Canada has enshrined trans rights in our law. Bill C-16, the thing everybody freaked out about, and then nothing happened. No, that has not happened. Okay? You can affirm transgender identity and still recognize that the vast majority of people are cisgender, so majority rules apply. You know, it's very important that if, say, estrogen is a factor on the way MS behaves, that benefits trans people too, because if they're taking estrogen, guess what? This is ridiculous. What? Female prisoners, most prisons that have a sizable trans population, or some prisons even separate the gay prisoners from the straight ones. Okay? Like, prison reform is a big thing, and shame on her for pulling this into that. This is, one is not going to affect the other. This is a complete straw man. And she doesn't explain how it's going to affect these things. She just, I'm concerned. Oh, automatically that makes your concerns valid. Second reason is I'm an ex-teacher and the founder of a children's charity. Another charity! Which gives me an interest in both education and safeguarding. Like many others, I have deep concerns about the effect the trans rights movement is having on both. Being an ex-teacher doesn't make you any more of an authority on the issue. And having a children's charity doesn't, it's your charity. If you don't want to support trans kids, that's your right. People are going to take issue with it, but that's your right. Your charity can do whatever you want on both counts. Okay? Your charitable trust can exclude trans people all you want. It's a private business. It's your money. Do with it what you will. No one can stop you. People can only disagree with you and find your views abhorrent. The same way people went after Hobby Lobby and Chick-fil-A. These are for-profit businesses, but still, same premise applies. gay wedding cake maker again, upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court. It's abhorrent, but it's okay. Free speech, private business. Reserving the right to refuse service to anyone. Okay? Like, people can have repellent views. Privately. The government can't discriminate based on a private person's bigotry. Very, very different. Okay. The third is that, as a much-banned author, I'm interested in freedom of speech and have publicly defended it, even on to Donald Trump. Oh, much-banned author. Oh, yeah, you're so banned, J.K. Rowling, that there's not one but 2 Florida theme parks devoted to Harry frickin' Potter. Oh, yeah, you're so canceled. Ridiculous. The fourth is where things start to get truly personal. As if it wasn't before. My charities, my teaching, my banned books, but now we're getting personal. Okay. The fourth is where things start to get truly personal. I'm concerned about the huge explosion in young women wishing to transition. Huge explosion! Oh, did we go from 0.5% of the population to 2-3% of the population? Oh, huge explosion! In young women wishing to transition, and also about the increasing numbers who seem to be detransitioning. We're talking about... Okay. Before we get any further, I'm not even gonna read the detransitioning stuff, because here's the facts on detransitioning. The vast majority of people who detransition do it because of parental pressure. It is 0.5%, less than 1%. Of the remainder of the people who detransition who do it because they think they made a mistake. It is mostly because of family pressure. So I'm going to skip the rest of it, including the reference to girls with autism, because friggin' shame on you. Skip. Furor, whatever. You notice it's the outrage. She dared to challenge one of the central tenets of trans activism. It's not that people dare to challenge it. There are huge debates within trans inclusive spaces about whether we refer to everything as biological sex and gender as interchangeable, whether gender is different from sex. There are those like me who openly say I believe in 5 gender theory, meaning that trans woman is a different gender than cis woman, but they are all under the umbrella of womanhood. Then we have trans men and cis men, and then intersex people. I didn't come up with this. Indigenous cultures did. Okay, this has been around for a long time. I am not called a transphobe for holding that view. It is not required that you believe cis woman equals trans woman. You must believe cis woman equals woman, trans woman equals woman. That's the equation, not what she's claiming. What she's claiming is just categorically false. And that's why I'm so annoyed. And that's why I've dedicated almost an entire week of content to this with a diversion into, yay, PlayStation. What she is saying is just not so. I lecture at universities. I talk about trans misogyny in my talks. I have taken courses that basically teach that sex is biology, gender is your identity. Then we get into gender performance. I talked about how gender identity and gender performance are not the same thing. Absolutely no one is claiming that the anatomy and physiology of a cisgender woman and a transgender woman are identical. We are saying that the definition of woman, not cisgender woman, or she says natal woman, just to be extra belligerent and not use the preferred terminology, because she's not even going to give them that, right? But we are not saying that cisgender women and transgender women are the same. That's absurd and ludicrous. We are saying that because the idea of being a woman, as Simone de Beauvoir said, One is not born, but rather becomes a woman. Okay? Remember that's the Simone de Beauvoir quote, because we're frickin' getting there. There's more to being a woman than having a vagina. Okay? There's more to being a woman than having breasts. There's more to being a woman than having an XX chromosome. Okay? Because some women, small percentage, but they're XXY. They have an extra chromosome, or XXX. These things happen. They're a small percentage of people, but they're still women. There is no single physiological or anatomical identifier that we can agree makes you a woman. Having a uterus doesn't make you a woman, because that means that women who have hysterectomies cease to become women. We know this. This is a fluid definition to begin with, okay? Just because someone doesn't have the requisite body parts that make you personally comfortable does not mean that they are not part of the spectrum of womanhood, because it's a spectrum to begin with, right? If a woman has a double mastectomy, they're still women, okay? If a woman has a hysterectomy or has her fallopian tubes or ovaries removed, they are still women. These anatomical parts are not prerequisites to being called women. So, no one, okay? Some people, this is a sophistry argument. Some people who use sex to refer to the construct, okay? Say sex and gender are the same thing, and sex is a social construct, okay? To judge everybody who believes that trans women are in fact women by that metric is taking the minority opinion and expanding it to the whole. This is not the issue people have with the people she supported and her herself. It's that they make absurdist claims to force this into a realm that is nuts. Okay? But let's just, there's a bunch of other stuff that just I'm not going to read because it's garbage and I don't want to spread it. Okay? But here we go. Here's the personal part, right? When I read about the theory of gender identity, I remember how mentally sexless I felt in youth. Remember I talked about this myself earlier? I still feel kind of mentally sexless. I remember Colette's description of herself as a mental hermaphrodite, and Simone de Beauvoir's words. Simone de Beauvoir, the woman who said one is not born a woman, one becomes one. Okay, Simone de Beauvoir. It is perfectly natural for the future woman, meaning not yet a woman. Future woman. It's right there. It's right there in the quote she chose to use. Okay? It is perfectly natural for the future woman to feel indignant at the limitations posed upon her by her sex. The real question is not why she should reject them. The problem is rather to understand why she accepts them. She used a quote that refutes a biological origin of gender to prove gender is biological. Now, keep in mind, Simone de Beauvoir wrote originally in French. And there are little quirks of French language that make interpreting de Beauvoir's words a little trickier in translation. Now, one thing you should know about Simone de Beauvoir is she found reproduction disgusting. So Simone de Beauvoir also had threesomes with Jean-Paul Sartre and their students, female students. Inappropriate at best, abuse of power at worst. So Simone de Beauvoir is not a paragon. She's not right about everything. But look at the words. Look at the words J.K. Rowling chose to use to claim sex is anatomical in origin. It is perfectly natural for the future woman, based on one is not born a woman, one becomes a woman. I misquoted that. That's not the exact words, but it's like, Simone de Beauvoir in French used the gender neutral pronoun all in the quote. That's important. There is a gender neutral pronoun in French that does not exist in English. That's why it's one is not born. Gender neutral. Very important. If English had a gender neutral pronoun, a lot of this shit would be solved. Okay? But going on. Okay. It is perfectly natural for the future woman to feel indignant at the limitations posed upon her by her sex. The real question is not why she should reject them. The problem is rather to understand why she accepts them. J.K. Rowling, for some odd reason, decided to show this as proof that gender is biological. Or sex is biological. Simone de Beauvoir said sex. The book was called Le Deuxième Sexe. Okay. She referred to sex. Simone de Beauvoir referred to assumptions, social ideas of sex and gender as something that a woman can choose to accept or reject. I know I'm splitting hairs here, but it's philosophy. But also, this is a terrible quote to back up what J.K. Rowling is trying to back up, which just shows how down the emotional doublethink rabbit hole she's gone. And here we go. As I didn't have a realistic possibility of becoming a man back in the 1980s, it had to be books and music that got me through both my mental health issues and the sexualized scrutiny and judgment that set so many girls to war against their bodies in their teens. Sorry, J.K. Rowling. People did transition in the 80s. They talked about they used a thing that's now determined to be a slur in the 70s, but they featured them on 70s cop shows. It was a possibility. You could do it. So you're just wrong there. It was an option you chose not to pursue because you didn't feel strongly enough about it. But just saying that it wasn't an option back then is false. It's totally false. It was a rough road. It's a rough road now, but you could do it. You know? Fortunately for me, I found my own sense of otherness and my ambivalence about being a woman reflected in the work of female writers and musicians who reassured me that, in spite of everything a sexist world tries to throw at the female-bodied, it's fine. Wait, J.K. Rowling. Is it throw at women or is it throw at the female-bodied? You can't argue both sides of this thing. Moving on. It's fine to not feel pink, frilly, and compliant inside your own head. It's okay to feel confused, dark, both sexual and non-sexual. What does this have to do with anything about gender identity? This is gender performance. She's either totally backward on this or she is deliberately misleading. Oh, and now she says, I want to be very clear here. I know transition will be a solution for some gender dysphoric people, although I'm also aware through extensive research that studies have constantly shown between 60 to 90% of gender dysphoric teens will grow out of their dysphoria. J.K. Rowling, we're not talking about teens specifically here. You are creating a straw man. Nothing that you objected to originally in an article about menstruation said anything about teens. So either these legitimately gender dysphoric people are dysphoric and they are women. If transition is a solution, then they are women. Or they're not. You can't have it both ways. You're talking about both sides of your mouth and your ass on this. So the rest of this is just nonsense. And then we got to, it's funny, a friend of mine with a trans relative called BS on this. We're living through the most misogynistic period I've experienced. Back in the 80s, I imagined that my future daughters, should I have any, would have it far better than I ever did. But between the backlash against feminism and a porn-saturated online culture, now we're about porn? I believe things have gotten significantly worse. I believe, no proof. She is wrong, okay? It's freaking annoying. As things are right now. Harvard was not integrated based on gender in the 1980s, okay? We didn't have nearly as many women representing us in multiple forms of government. A woman had never run for president and won the popular vote. Okay, in England, it was Thatcher. Okay, but England has had another female prime minister since Thatcher. Some people argue she wasn't a very good one, but she was there. And the British royal family changed their laws of succession so that the firstborn of any gender or sex, if J.K. Rowling would have it that way, they can be ruling monarch. There's so many women are going into space. Women are advancing. Top defense industry CEOs are women. Like, on every objective and subjective metric, things are far better for women than they were in the 1980s. Our sexual assault laws have gotten so much more all-encompassing. Like, just because Donald Trump's an asshole doesn't negate all that progress. She would probably not have the success she has now in the 80s. You know, there's a reason she, published with a gender-neutral pen name, but Stephanie Meyer, she told a ton of books. And she sold them. It's a woman on the cover. This is objectively not true that we're living through the most misogynistic period we've ever experienced. It's just not true. And I think at this point, we can just stop. You know, she goes on to talk about being a domestic abuse and sexual assault survivor, and I think this is what it really is. She's triggered. She hasn't got effective therapy. She hasn't completed effective therapy. She'd rather take her crap out on trans women who are just trying to live their blinking lives. That's what this is about. Like, she has said so many misleading or just provably false things. And that's just the cherry on the bullshit sundae, as disgusting as that sounds. When you hit categorically false, disprovable statements like that, it shows she is not thinking clearly. That is just objectively false. Believe what, and people say, oh, she's made some good points. And this is why I'm making this video. That I get that people believe she's making good points because they don't have the whole story. She's framing it in a misleading way. This isn't about free speech. This is about accurate facts. And, she gets into the bathroom stuff. And I'll leave it there because a lot of people may not know this. Okay. This has come up again and again and again and again and again. Okay, this idea that if trans women are able to use women's spaces, that male predators will use it to prey on women. Ironically, that's exactly what Donald Trump is accused of doing to at least one woman, assaulting her in a change room. So, even as is, male predators with enough power, apparently it's happening already. But, okay. There's a dynamic at play in people who commit premeditated assault in that regard, meaning they plan it and they seek it out. It's not, a crime of opportunity. It's not, oh, I got drunk. That's all crap. It's not the same motivation though, okay? These premeditated sexual assaults that are actually about power. The dynamic is power, okay? No man who wants to lord the power of his gender over women dresses up like women to do so because he would find that process inherently humiliating, and therefore it takes away the buzz of his power trip. The idea that, like I said, if a guy has a thing about assaulting a woman in a change room, he can do it already. This idea that it's even possible, okay, for people who've never been in a women's change room, here's how it goes, okay? or women's bathroom, okay? There's open spaces by the mirrors. It's not like where there's urinals, okay? Everything's an individual stall. And then there's the sinks, okay? So either the idea is you'll push someone into a stall, at which if they scream, somebody's gonna know something's wrong, or it's out in the public space because the doors lock. Somebody can't just barge their way in. It's an absolutely absurd fallacy that people just perpetuate. Because if you're among certain groups that are driven by fear, and yeah, for a lot of people the fear is real, but the fear that gay marriage was going to lead to the downfall of society, or there was something horrible about black people and white people marrying, and oh, God forbid, breeding. These were legitimate fears in some places too. They're wrong. Just because a fear is real doesn't mean it's valid. You know, the thing that J.K. Rowling is trying to claim about trans women's gender identity. Oh, yes, you know, transition works for some people, but it's not real. Like, no matter how you slice this, she fails based on her own structures. And I think the fact that, you know, she's a... This, I'm a domestic abuse survivor, strikes me in a lot of ways as Kevin Spacey coming out as gay to try to get himself out of trouble. It's the wrong time. Her status as a domestic abuse survivor is irrelevant to her opinions on trans people. Okay? And she says at the end, I believe the majority of trans-identified people not only pose zero threat to others, but are vulnerable for all the reasons I've outlined. And yet, the crux of her argument is that trans people are a potential threat. The vast majority of any people pose zero threat. And if somebody's a psychopath who wants to get power over other people, women can do that as well as men. So this is very typical of people who are trans exclusionary radical feminists. They are not, in fact, feminists at all. What they are misandrists. And they don't feel like it's fashionable to come right out and say, I hate men except for some notable exceptions who are beta enough for me to tolerate. They work out their misandry through really, really, really awful statements about trans women. This is what it looks like here. And yes, it comes from trauma. Yes, what happened to her was likely really awful and sustained. But instead of putting it in its place where it belongs, that was a bad person who did bad things, and that sucks. She lays it on all men, unless she's proven otherwise. And by extension, trans women, because she's so afraid of men as a rule, that she lumps in people who aren't men in the male category, just in case. And I'll leave it there, because as you can tell, this frustrates me. And for a lot of reasons. But mostly because this is not just bad logic. This is not her being wrong, just wrong. To an extent, she is bullshitting. And based on the flowery language, I believe knowingly. Because instead of examining her beliefs, she's just layering the bullshit on bullshit on bullshit. So some people agree to her. Appeal to popularity, logical fallacy. Okay? It's all logical fallacy. It's appeal to popularity and begging the question. Just because your view is popular in your circles doesn't make you right. So, this was long, totally optional. Put it out an hour later than the fun video. But if you like this kind of stuff, I don't have the millions J.K. Rowling does. And I don't play the victim the way she does. I'm just asking if you think this is worth supporting, support it. Help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Our community is trans inclusive. Thanks for watching.